You did the work. You stayed late. You fixed the problem nobody else wanted to touch. You answered the messages. You took on the extra responsibility. And then somehow your coworker got promoted. The person who seemed less experienced, less reliable, maybe even less productive. And you're left wondering, what exactly are they doing that I'm not? Because here's the frustrating part. Getting promoted isn't always a reward for doing the most work. Sometimes it's a reward for being seen as ready for a different kind of work. And that difference can completely change the way you think about your career. Think about what usually happens when you're the reliable person at work. Your manager gives you something difficult. You handle it. Another problem appears. You handle that too. Someone misses a deadline. You help fix it. A project starts falling apart. You quietly rescue it. And eventually, you built something that feels like a strong case for promotion. You have proof that you work hard. You're dependable. People trust you, so you wait. You assume someone will notice. But there's a problem with that strategy. Your manager may see your output without seeing your ambition. They may think, she's great at this. He's someone I can always count on. They're one of my strongest employees. Those sound like compliments, but there's a hidden danger. You can become extremely valuable in the role you're already in. And if nobody has a reason to picture you somewhere else, your reliability can accidentally become a ceiling. Because promotions usually aren't just about asking, who did the most? They're also about asking, who looks ready for what comes next? And those are two very different questions. Imagine two employees. Employee A quietly completes everything assigned to them. The work is excellent, no drama, no missed deadlines. They rarely speak in meetings unless someone asks them a question. Employee B also performs well. But when a problem appears, they don't just solve it. They explain what caused it. They suggest a better process. They communicate the result. They volunteer for projects that involve other teams. And when their manager asks what they want to work toward, they actually have an answer. Neither employee is necessarily better, but one person's work is easier to connect to a larger role. And that's where visibility becomes important. Not fake self-promotion, not bragging, not talking about yourself every 5 minutes. Visibility means making your contribution understandable to the people who make decisions about your future. Because your manager doesn't experience every hour you spend working. They don't see every spreadsheet you fixed at 9:47 p.m. They don't hear every difficult conversation you handled. They don't know about every problem you prevented before it became a problem. They see fragments, meetings, updates, results, conversations. And decisions have to be made from those fragments. That's why two people can put in similar amounts of effort and still create very different impressions. One person leaves behind evidence of impact. The other leaves behind evidence of effort. And effort is important, but impact is easier to recognize. Here's where this gets even more uncomfortable. Sometimes the person who gets promoted isn't necessarily the person who deserves it most by some objective measurement. Organizations aren't machines that perfectly calculate who worked hardest. Promotion decisions can depend on available roles, manager judgment, organizational needs, relationships, demonstrated readiness, and how clearly someone's contributions are understood. There may not even be a promotion available. A great employee can be ready for more, while the company simply has nowhere appropriate to move them. So if you've been passed over, it doesn't automatically mean you're not good enough. But it does mean you should stop treating hard work as the entire strategy, because there is another difference between being a great employee and being perceived as ready for the next level. Ownership. People at higher levels are often expected to think beyond their assigned tasks. Instead of saying, tell me what needs to be done, they start asking, what problem are we actually trying to solve? Instead of, I finished my part. They start thinking, did the whole project actually work? Instead of, nobody told me about this issue. They start saying, I noticed this could become a problem, so here's what I think we should do. That's a subtle shift. You're no longer communicating, I'm good at completing work. You're communicating, I can take responsibility for outcomes. And that is a much stronger promotion signal. But there's one more piece people often underestimate. You have to let people know where you're trying to go. This sounds obvious. Yet many hardworking employees never actually have the conversation. They wait for their performance to speak for itself. They hope their manager eventually says, You're ready for a promotion, but your manager may be thinking about budgets, deadlines, hiring, other employees, their own priorities. They may genuinely appreciate you and still have no idea that you're trying to move into a leadership role. So instead of silently waiting, you can make the conversation clearer. Not, I've worked really hard. When am I getting promoted? But I'd like to move toward the next level. What would you need to see from me for you to consider me ready? That question changes everything. Now you're not asking someone to reward your effort. You're asking them to define the gap between where you are and where you want to go. Maybe they say you need more leadership experience. Maybe you need to present to senior stakeholders. Maybe you need to own a larger project. Maybe your results aren't visible enough. Or maybe they tell you something you didn't expect. There isn't currently an opening. That's valuable information too, because now you're no longer guessing. And here's the deeper lesson. You don't need to become louder. You don't need to become the office politician. You don't need to pretend to be someone you're not. You need to make the value you're already creating easier to understand. If you solved a problem, explain what changed. If you improved a process, show the result. If you took ownership of something outside your normal responsibilities, make that visible. If you want a different role, say so, and keep a record of your accomplishments. Not because you need to brag, because memory is unreliable. Months later, I worked really hard is vague, but quite I reduced the turnaround time. I helped prevent this recurring issue. I took ownership of this project. I trained the new team members. Those are concrete. They tell a story about increasing responsibility, and that story matters. Because your career isn't only shaped by how much value you create, it's also shaped by whether the right people can recognize that value, understand what it means, and connect it to where you want to go. So if you've been watching someone else get opportunities while you're quietly carrying more and more responsibility, don't immediately conclude that they're better than you. And don't immediately conclude that your workplace is unfair either. Pause, ask yourself 3 questions. What value am I actually creating? Who knows about it? And most importantly, what evidence have I given people that I'm ready for the next level? Because sometimes the problem isn't that you're not doing enough. Sometimes you spent so much time proving that you can handle the work that you forgot to show what you could do with more responsibility. And if that sounds familiar, there's one more workplace trap you need to understand. Why becoming the person everyone can rely on can actually keep you stuck in the same role.